Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI, and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Bob Mackin. The award winner publishes thebreaker.news. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, the Union of BC Municipalities, is it going to keep sponsorship from China?
It is going to keep a $6,000 payment, and it is going to go forward with the wine and dine, not dine, the finger food and various hors d'oeuvres, and lots of free booze at the bar, paid for by the Chinese government, where they'll have their local consul general, if not her deputy, who will be telling them all about the great things that Xi Jinping is doing in China, and how Canada and China should be closer together and doing more business with each other, even though they are the number 2 trade partner and significant tourism provider, and I'm sure Canada thanks them for the business. But the questions that have been raised by Brad West, the mayor of Port Coquitlam recently, are that does Canada want to still be this close, and should Canada be any closer with the country that is holding 2 Canadians essentially hostage, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, in retaliation for the Meng Wanzhou arrest. The Meng Wanzhou arrest at Vancouver International Airport, of course, on request of the United States under the federal treaties. The U.S. wants to have her extradited to face fraud charges in New York, and, she's going through the Canadian legal system. But in the meantime, she's resting comfortably at a mansion in Shaughnessy, just a couple doors down from the United States Consul mansion. But meanwhile, there's a million people or so who are incarcerated in Xinjiang province just because they're Muslim. And China thinks that they're all security risks, so it's incarcerating them and re-educating them, even little children. It's separating children from their parents. But China wants to do more business with Canada and wants to influence Canadian politics, and the Union of BC Municipalities leadership thinks it's all tickety-boo. And not to mention that lawyers and journalists are routinely imprisoned in China for just doing their jobs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of problems in a nutshell that are manifesting itself these days. Not to mention warnings from federal intelligence authorities that the federal election coming up in October is ripe for influence and interference by foreign actors, and of course China has a big stake in Canada from an investment standpoint, and it has a very large diaspora. But of course, there's people within the Chinese community that are very outspoken and reminding us all that Chinese are not all the same, and those who are worried about the situation in Hong Kong, of course, say that Hong Kong is not Chinese, and Hong Kongers are not Chinese; they're Hong Kongers. And of course, there's the Taiwanese community, and Taiwan is itself a functioning democracy, and however China wants it to be reunited someday. Again, just going over all the issues, putting it all in one nice little neat package. But the Union of BC Municipalities decided last week that it was going to stay the course and continue with the arrangement that it had and not upset the apple cart, but it was going to appoint a committee to look at the future of these kinds of arrangements. And one of the people on that committee is Greg Moore, who's Brad West's predecessor in Port Coquitlam. Greg Moore, of course, benefited from that sponsorship of China. He went on some junkets to China. Other officials from Port Coquitlam went on junkets to China, and of course, we've seen stories about the school board in the Tri-Cities making deals with China as well, and the very controversial Confucius Institute, part of China's foreign influence campaign to set up schools to teach Mandarin language. Of course, it's great for the world to learn more languages, you know, for Chinese to learn more English, and for people on this side of the water to learn more Mandarin. You know, if we could communicate with each other better, it would be a better world. But the end doesn't justify the means, and in this case, China has other goals with all of its various methods of foreign influence. And authors like Clive Hamilton in Australia and Jonathan Manthorpe here in Canada have warned of what is really going on. This isn't all about goodwill and peace to all. This is about China wanting to someday overtake the United States as a superpower of the world. There's geopolitical aspirations involved there. Essentially world domination. That's what's happening here, is the United States and China are jockeying back and forth with each other, and here we are kind of caught in the middle on so many different ways in Vancouver. And Union of BC Municipalities has had this reception since 2012. I've been covering and making light of this for a number of years. It's finally gotten to a critical mass. It finally took someone like Brad West to stand up and say enough is enough. Why are we doing this? Why are we taking money from a foreign government to lobby local government politicians? It's a very good question, but there's some in the UBCM who are agreeing with Brad West. The mayor of Delta, the mayor of Kamloops are on his side. The mayor of Victoria and the mayor of Richmond are not on his side. The mayor of Victoria and the mayor of Richmond are looking forward to going to the event if their schedule permits, and they think it's all a great idea. I think this is going to shine some more light on the UBCM Convention, and I won't be surprised if there are perhaps protests outside the hotel where this is held in downtown Vancouver in September. And it's also interesting that the week that the UBCM Convention happens in September is the same week that Meng Wanzhou is back in court as her lawyers make various applications for evidence disclosure so that they can mount their case next year to try to thwart the extradition application of the United States.
With this kind of influence peddling, would Canadians be allowed to set up a similar suite or booth at a Chinese Chamber of Commerce event?
Well, there are some Chinese Chamber of Commerces in Vancouver, and I don't think they'd be very receptive to that, especially if you're going to go in there and say nice things about the democracy protesters in Hong Kong or people doing the same thing in Taiwan. There's a group called the Canadian Alliance of Chinese Associations, and it's an umbrella of various business and cultural groups, and they are very pro-Beijing. The head of that group, Chen Yongtao, actually went to Beijing as a guest delegate to some recent National People's Congress meetings in Beijing, essentially their rubber stamp parliament. So you've got this organization which is essentially a foreign affiliate of the Chinese Communist Party working here in Vancouver to try to rally various mainland Chinese business associations and cultural groups. Meanwhile, there are others in the Chinese community, Taiwanese, but more so Hong Kongers who have been taking to the streets in recent months to shine a light on the battle over in Hong Kong to stop the extradition bill, which the chief executive of Hong Kong has said is not going to go forward. But not all those Hong Kongers and Hong Kong expats are convinced until there's more demonstrative language used to actually kill the bill. And there's also a lot of worries because some of my sources are telling me that there's more Hong Kong investment flowing into Vancouver, flowing in much quicker than it was in the last couple of years. In the last couple of months, it's really accelerated because entrepreneurs who have investments are worried about their investments and are looking for a safe haven, safe harbor to do business. Vancouver is going to benefit from that, and probably other places in the Pacific Rim, maybe Singapore, maybe a little bit Taiwan, but maybe Australia as well as another flight of people and investments out of Hong Kong because of the uncertainty there. Back in 1997, when the handover took place, when China took possession of Hong Kong from Britain and named it the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, they said for at least 50 years it would function under a one government, two systems process. Hong Kong is largely self-governing, although key positions are appointed by Beijing, but it was supposed to be allowed to function as it had before, but we're slowly seeing the erosion of, or at least attempted erosion of civil rights, attempted moves to position Hong Kong closer to Beijing. And this wasn't really supposed to happen for another 50 years, but we're almost halfway through that process, the one government, two systems, and we're seeing China want to erase that accord, which has worried a lot of people in Hong Kong who are proud of their rule of law and proud of their free press and proud of other institutions. They're worried that that Beijing is going to really take it over. So this is an interesting time, and it's rather unusual that you only have one mayor from the suburbs who's really taking up this cause. Where are all the other mayors? Why aren't they speaking out? Especially when you've got such awful human rights abuses that are happening. Have they just lost sight of reality in the pursuit of economic development?
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Bob Mackin. Bob, there's concerns that a Chinese person at the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg, the only one with a level 4 rating and responsible for helping develop the latest vaccine for Ebola, might have some kind of Chinese connection. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, there was an arrest and ejection made, and this is quite unsettling that there's worries of Chinese espionage happening in educational institutions, although this isn't exactly a big surprise. There was a report in an Australian academic from earlier this year that said that there might be too many Chinese state associated or even funded researchers and scientists on universities in the West, and there are severe worries about what they actually are doing with the knowledge that they're gaining, the knowledge that they're sharing while at universities. Are they at Western universities to learn how we do things and to impart how they do things, or are they there for intellectual property theft? This is definitely a concern. It's been voiced by intelligence agencies federally, and we're seeing at least this one case happening at the very important, very secure lab in Winnipeg.
Well, back in 2009, a former researcher at the lab was convicted of trying to smuggle genetic material from the Ebola virus across the Manitoba-North Dakota border. So security concerns about this facility seem to be very real.
Indeed. And yeah, I remember back when I was working for the North Shore News a couple of decades ago, and I was doing a story on Environment Canada's meteorological lab in Vancouver, in South Vancouver, sitting in with meteorologists to see how they did weather forecasting. And I was surprised at the time a group did come in from China, meteorologists, and they came in with a video camera. Not everyone had video cameras at that time, but I was rather one half amused and the other half a little bit horrified that they just let someone in from a foreign country with a video camera at a science office, a scientific office, even one as innocuous as weather forecasting, that they'd allow someone from a foreign country, foreign government to do that. And because I don't think that would be very very welcome in Chinese government offices to allow foreigners to bring video cameras in and just film the day-to-day work. So I think that there's been only until recently has Canada actually taken seriously the threat that there is. As much as Canada has for the last 4 decades tried to be closer to China for all the good reasons, to help them with their economy, help them become a better society, and help us reap some of those benefits. And we do have again, very large Chinese ethnic community. It's a very diverse Chinese ethnic community across Canada. All the reasons to come closer were very well intentioned, and there was up until about a decade ago this whole idea that if China comes closer to the West, maybe China will become more westernized, that maybe it'll open itself up to Western ideas of rule of law, and maybe someday it'll become closer to a democracy. These were great ideas when they were talked about for so many years, but seemed to have all stopped in 2012 when the latest leadership change happened and Xi Jinping became the president. And February of 2018 was when they dropped the term limits, and he's now essentially president for life. So as much as people are concerned and often complain about what goes on south of the border with the Donald Trump circus, Donald Trump could be the ex-president of the United States, maybe by January 2021, if he loses the next election. Let's say if he makes it to the next election, he could be impeached. He could make it as long as 2025, but that'll be the end of Donald Trump, the White House. By then, Xi Jinping will only be in his early 70s. He could be ruling for another decade or even 2. You never know. I think that should be more concerning to people. Is the Xi Jinping and his reign in China, which has taken China further away from the democracy people hoped it would someday become, and made it more even a prison state. And of course, next door you've got Vladimir Putin. These are threats that have to be taken seriously. As well, Richard Fadden, the former CSIS head, was in Vancouver a couple of months ago, and he gave a talk, and the talk was on the theme of the leaderless West. That while we have these authoritarian leaders in China and Russia who are intent on making life difficult for the West and Western democracies, we've got a bit of another problem here. Is what's going on with North America and Europe. The Trump circus, of course, continues, and then over in Europe, you've got Angela Merkel, the leader of Germany, on her way out eventually. You've got the situation in Britain, where you've got a leadership change there. You've got Macron in France. He's got a lot of internal strife with the Yellow Vest protests. A lot of people unhappy with his leadership and with the economy in France. And so you've got unstable leadership or lagging leadership or lack of leadership in various countries which have been part of the G7 for so many years, which puts more emphasis on more stable democracies, like Japan and Australia. But Japan and Australia themselves are geographically isolated. So we're entering into this interesting phase that Richard Fadden, the former CSIS director, called the leaderless West. That countries that were dominating the world are now faced with having to deal with what Russia and what China are doing in order to shake up the order.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, what's the latest on the BC legislature's spending scandal?
Well, we're waiting to see if charges are going to happen. The RCMP have been investigating this for the better part of a year, and we found out there were two special prosecutors appointed, and that was last fall, and we found out November 20th when Gary Lenz and Craig James were both walked out of the legislature. Craig James, of course, resigned and retired in disgrace back in May. On the night before, he was going to be fired by the legislature for misconduct. He was found in misconduct on 4 occasions in the report by Beverly McLaughlin, the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. She let Gary Lenz, the Sergeant-at-Arms, off the hook. He remains on suspended leave with pay. But now we find out that there is an investigation into into Gary Lenz under the Police Act. And Doug Lepard, former senior officer of Vancouver Police and former head of the Transit Police, is looking at this investigation. We don't exactly know what it's all about, the terms of reference, but there appears to be some holes that were in the McLaughlin report. And of course, McLaughlin never put anybody under oath. She was never given the power to put anyone under oath, and I still haven't got a reasonable answer as to why she didn't demand that as the person being paid very well to do that investigation, why she didn't demand that power to make sure that she was being told the truth by those that she interviewed. So maybe this is about Gary Lenz and his poor policing of the legislature, because he was essentially the top cop of the legislature while Craig James was getting away with all sorts of shenanigans. And from the first Plecas report, we've got Plecas saying that Gary Lenz told him not to trust Craig James. So if Gary Lenz was telling Daryl Plecas not to trust Craig James, why did Gary Lenz not take any steps to rein in Craig James? Those are some questions, some important questions, and maybe in this Police Act investigation by Doug Lepard, we'll get some answers as to why this happened. Because this all goes back to corruption and waste and misspending at the legislature, and Daryl Plecas, the speaker, who has been speaker for 2 years this September, has endeavored to clean it up with his chief of staff, Alan Mullen, who is doing a cross-country trip right now, going by car to various other legislatures to learn about security policies and procedures and bring back some ideas to Victoria. They haven't announced the cost of this, but they said that they did it this way to keep it under control instead of flying from city to city. Mary Polak, the BC Liberal House leader, has taken it upon herself to leak that information, leak the information out about the Police Act investigation, and also to be very critical of of Alan Mullen's journey, his fact-finding mission, which is kind of interesting because when Mary Polak was the Minister of Environment, I remember asking her in 2015 and getting all sorts of non-answers and no comments about how much she was spending on our dime to go over to the United Nations Paris Climate Convention, the big climate party. She didn't need to be there. This was an event that really is about federal governments making agreements on carbon limits and carbon taxation. She didn't need to be there at all. She was going there for the perks and for the photo ops. And I was asking at the time, how much is the budget for a trip, and she didn't actually sign off on the budget for a trip until after she came back, and even then she lowballed it. Said it was about $2,400, but it was well over $10,000 for the whole trip. And so here, as the House leader, trying to get on her high horse and criticize Daryl Plecas for trying to get some sort of justice and clean up the corruption in the legislature. And here she is on her high horse, trying to criticize Alan Mullen and his fact-finding mission, when in fact she has a history of spending irregularities and secrecy of her own. It the show just continues in Victoria at the legislature, and it's one of the reasons why more recent public opinion polls just show that the Liberals are no closer to gaining back the trust of the public than they were 2 years ago when the NDP was sworn into office.
Going to the federal Liberals, the federal government gave $1 million to the Montreal Just for Laughs Festival, and now we've found out that Justin Trudeau's mother, Margaret, is going to be one of the acts in that festival. Is that another case of follow the money when it comes to federal politics?
Oh, yeah, Just for Laughs. Hey, did you hear the one about the Prime Minister's mom?
And the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, well, there's like a story that iPolitics did back January 21st this year. Just for Laughs Festival lobbies Ottawa for funding. So they were already in the market, not for federal government looking for some federal funding to hire a lobbyist to lobby the Department of Canadian Heritage. They wanted to hold free outdoor events, promote Canadian artists, to make the festival more accessible, all very nice things. I mean, Just for Laughs is a very important part of Montreal, promoting Montreal as a tourist destination. It's really the number one stand-up comedy festival in the world, and it gets attention worldwide. Good on them for that. But they wanted to get even more money. They received $1 million from Canadian Heritage and $700,000 from another agency in the last fiscal year, and the expected funding in 2019, they received about $2.8 million from provincial municipal governments last year. This is it doesn't all rely on ticket sales, doesn't all rely on sponsorship, and doesn't all rely on merchandise or the media rights sales of their specials, which is very, very interesting. So what better way to try to curry favor with the government than in an election year hire the Prime Minister's mom to come and be a performer? Novel strategy, that's at least what it looks like. But this may not rank up there with the sponsorship scandal of years gone by, which brought down another Liberal government, but it does raise questions about whether they did in fact put Margaret Trudeau on the bill as a way to open doors in Ottawa, because what better way to get attention with the Prime Minister, who is a member of Parliament for a Montreal riding, than for his mom to be on the bill? What better way to loosen up the purse strings and open it up and give public money, especially for a festival which hired a lobbyist to get more public money earlier this year? It's no laughing matter if that is the case.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Bob Mackin, award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.news. Check out The Breaker on thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.